Hello, hello. So good to see everybody, for everyone to be here. Hi guys, my name is Maggie Siciliano. You might know me as Maggie Maybe Reading on TikTok. I just want to thank you guys for joining us to discuss the absolutely unhinged conclusion to All of Us Villains, the duology, All of Our Demise. As you might know, it is Barnes & Noble's August YA monthly pick. So I'm just going to do a quick intro and a little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to dive right in. So as you might not, if you might not know, Amanda Foody is a New York Times and indie bestselling author of YA and children's fantasy novels, including the All of Us Villains duology, the Wilder Lore series, the Shadow Game series, and more. So you can find all of her updates on Instagram at Amanda Foody or on her website, which is amandafoody.com. And of course, I'm also joined by Christine Lynn Herman, who is the New York Times and indie bestselling author of novels about magic, monsters, and growing up. So not only the All of Us Villains duology, but the Devouring Gray duology and the Drowning Summer. So Christine resides in Somerville, Massachusetts with her partner and her cat. So to learn more about them, feel free to follow them on Instagram at Christine Exists. Sign up for Christine's newsletter or visit christinelynnherman.com. So just like a little bit of a reminder that if you did purchase book admissions, your signed book will be sent to you after the event. It'll be, you should expect it in about 8 to 10 business days. And I think we are done with all the housekeeping, and I get to officially welcome the two of you. So thank you so much for letting me discuss this book with you. Congrats on book 2.
Thank you so much for being here. This is so exciting.
Yeah, we're really excited about this.
I am too. I think if I have to say, I'm personally very excited because I absolutely devoured book 1, and book 2 is no different. I have read the second book, but I will not be spoiling anything from the second book. We will be spoiling book 1 though. Fair warning, all the spoilers out there. But we're going to start by discussing All of Our Demise with these two lovely ladies, and then we're going to open it up for questions from you guys. So feel free to pop a question in the Q&A and upvote that so I can make sure to ask them. So let's hop in. I want to take us back to like the first book, get us back into it. When I first read the book series, I fell in love with Alistair and Hendry. Was not expecting that to come out. I was devastated in the first part of the book because of Hendry. And so I'm curious, was he always supposed to come back? Did you know that was going to happen at the end of book 1?
Yes, that was our plan for Hendry from the very, very beginning. We had always known that we wanted to kill him off early in the book because we had thought, we have this death tournament book with the promise, obviously, of death to come, but wouldn't it be pretty shocking if we were to kill a character even before the death tournament began?
Yeah, I definitely wasn't expecting that one. And so, yeah, I was about to say, I definitely, it fulfilled all of my dreams of like a death tournament kind of book, because I never knew it was coming, and it started off on such a good note with that. And so I'm curious, I mean, I think of all of our favorite kind of like dystopians of the 2000s, and it was always a trilogy. Like that was just like this style seems to be in that vein. So was it always supposed to be a duology as well? Or is there more in this world? We love these characters. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, no, we always intended for it to be a duology. Just the two of them. Look how good they look together. I feel like we knew that we could wrap it up in 2 books, and I think we didn't want to kind of keep the reader in any more agony than we had already put them through. We were like, okay, at a certain point, this needs to end somewhere. But I think we also were concerned that the story would get like too drawn out and the pacing would suffer for it if we pushed the death tournament out too long. I think there's a reason that the Hunger Games trilogy involves several different death tournaments.
That's so fair. I mean, especially since, this had to be a new thing for both of you guys working with another author on a book. So how was that experience doing that? And then also I did see that you kind of at least in another interview, I saw that you guys kind of split between characters of writing one character or the other. What was that like? And can you tell us who you wrote?
Well, I mean, as you can imagine, writing a book with your best friend, it's terrible. It's no fun. We had the worst
Awful.
time
Wouldn't
Miserable
recommend it.
time.
from start to finish. It was totally miserable. No, co-writing was really, really awesome. So awesome that we're actually doing it again after the All of Us Villains duology. We've just had the best time doing it. And yeah, we did decide to approach the story by each writing 2 of the 4 point of view characters. We just thought that that would make the co-writing style a little bit more seamless. And no, we cannot actually share who wrote what. We are like very determined to try to keep it a secret the best that we can and leave you
I
guessing.
won't. Yeah, I was about to say, I won't lie. I definitely have tried like every arrangement in my head because I know that you guys have blended voices at this point. I mean, when you edit back and forth, it's kind of like you make it like it becomes both of your voice kind of. But I've definitely been like, well, if they wrote these 2, then how would these 2 work out? But okay, we'll leave that. We'll leave that for mystery. And very what?
Oh, people have tried to guess and they mostly get it wrong. That's been the most impressive part. Our agents couldn't tell, our partners couldn't tell, a lot of our friends couldn't tell. So that was really fun, actually. I was like, oh, good, we did our job.
I was about to say that's kind of incredible, and also makes me wonder, were you always like it has to be 4? Because of course there's a part of me that's like, why don't I get to hear about Finley? Like was it always going to be the 4 POVs?
Yeah.
Yes and no. So for the first book, yes, it was always going to be 4. And for the second book, we actually for a while were thinking that we were going to expand it out and have even more characters involved. Then we quickly realized that would get, it was already very chaotic. We realized that would get too much. So
that was the plan for a little while. Plans changed. It was, oh my gosh, 4 of them were so, it was like, at a certain point, it really felt like herding cats. I was like, they're everywhere. They're causing so much trouble. We can't add more voices into this.
No, I'm always so curious about that because do you feel like, are you those authors that like your characters take you places, or are you such planners that like you know exactly where they're going?
I would refer to us as planners who keep getting pleasantly and unpleasantly surprised.
Yeah, best laid plans. I do feel like with the characters in All of Us Villains, when we went into All of Our Demise, we really did have a vision for each of the characters' stories. And even when we went into the first book, we had a vision. I mean, every single character began with a sort of archetype in mind. There's a lot of fairy tale themes that are in play throughout the duology. And so we originally based each of the characters off of like very loosely a sort of fairy tale archetype. Like for instance, you know, Alistair comes from the family that has always won, and then Gavin comes from the family that has always lost, and like the hero and the villain, and we played with all of those sort of throughout the story. And so we did have a vision going forward, but the characters definitely showed us who they were over the course of the story.
Yeah, I love how that happens. I also love that you brought up the fairy tale aspect because for me, I very much picture this series very clearly. Like it's one of those that I see when I read, and I don't always do that. But I felt like it read a little bit like a movie because of the different POVs. And so I'm always thinking like, okay, I want every book series to be adapted into something. I just love that. But I'm curious if it ever did get picked up, do you think you would lean into like, oh, this is a dark fairy tale kind of aspect, like Once Upon a Time-esque or like Grimm, or would you go like, this is really grounded in reality and we're just making it like more harnessing that side of it?
I think we both like the dark fairy tale thing.
It's hard not to.
Although I will say authors have like very little control usually over film stuff. But I think both of us would love to see Villains adapted at some point in some way.
Yeah,
I definitely that would be amazing.
I was about to say, I definitely got a lot of questions like that. It was probably all like, can we see this on screen? And like, how do we save Alistair? Those were our 2 questions. Like everybody is an Alistair fan. So which makes me wonder, is there like a character that each of you is like specifically protective over? And it doesn't even have to be one of our main 4, but like for me, it's well, I won't give that away because that's actually a book 2 thing. So I'm not going to say anything, but you guys tell me, is there a character that you feel especially protective over?
It's funny you say this because I feel like so much of our co-writing process of us each having 2 characters is that I sometimes feel like we're each those characters' advocate. Like as we go to plan the story and we edit the story, you know, we're both in there being like, well, so and so in this point, like that doesn't make sense because of this, and then like, so I feel like the characters that we're protective of are the ones that we wrote.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
Unless Christine, you have a different answer.
I feel pretty protective over some of the side characters. I will say, I feel very protective of Henry. I think we both do.
Henry's been through a lot, and somebody should feel protective of him.
And there is a specific character in book 2 who I do feel very protective over, but that is very spoilery.
Oh, that's true. I can think of a certain 8-year-old character.
Yeah, a certain literal child.
That's who I was gonna say. That's my okay. So I'm glad we're all on the same page about our fan favorite. Okay, so I'm also, I gotta say, I did read a couple of interviews that you guys have had, and I did realize that you guys are not being asked the questions that you need to be asked. One of which, Christine, you don't get enough questions about food. So which food is book 2?
Something poisoned.
Okay, that's very promising, everybody. In case you were surprised in book 1, you'll be just as distraught and surprised in book 2.
That's what we aim for.
Perfect. And Amanda, I know you're a big wordy human being. So were there any words that you wrote down that specifically inspired you in book 2?
Ooh, any specific words? It's funny because coming up with the title for All of Our Demise was quite the process. We didn't really figure it out until pretty late in the game. But once it became the title, the permission to overuse the word demise became.
Don't call it overusing.
Really,
we used it the exact right amount.
No, but it instantly, it was already a very dramatic word, but suddenly it was 20 times more dramatic. I mean, every excuse possible. Yeah, that's definitely one of them.
We're both very fond of the thing where you say the title without saying the title, where you slightly reword the title and you're like, ha ha ha, no, those are what I said.
Oh, that would probably be the best at a dinner party. Just see how many conversations you can slip in All of Our Demise. Because now I definitely, I think, because now that title feels like it syncs so much with book 1. So I feel like it's wild to me that you guys had it took a lot of time to get there, because I feel like it so matches the vibe.
Awesome. I mean,
that's great to hear.
Now, I know that we talked about pain and surprise being a through line throughout this. Now, book 1 was definitely a pinball game of discoveries, especially that last 15% of the book, 20% of the book. I was literally where do we even look right now? Was that always the plan to end with the bang 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 cliffhanger?
Yeah, we both love to really just craft an ending designed to annihilate readers emotionally, and also us, honestly. There are some scenes in both of the books that I cried every single time I revised them, and not because I was having a bad time, because I was very emotionally invested. I think we also both really love a dramatic finale, and it was important to us that readers want to pick up the next book. So it was in our best interests to make everything as gripping and intense as possible.
Definitely. And I even feel because these characters are so painted as villains, the very small intimate moments got to me more in these books than probably any other books I read, just because your characters so rarely show that vulnerability. So when they do, all of a sudden I'm tears.
Yeah, I feel like both of us are very we're very character driven writers. Even though, I mean, a death tournament book is going to be obviously very, very fast paced, very plot driven, but we, at the end of the day, what we talk about in all of our text messages, like 90% of the time, is just how obsessed we are with the characters.
That's definitely true.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself like in public or in life situations being like, oh my gosh, that's totally something Isabel would do?
I feel like I have different reactions for different characters. I feel like sometimes I've definitely looked at pieces of clothing and been like, a character would wear that, or like makeup or something like that, or like been like, a character would like that song. That's the kind of stuff that I think about.
Yeah, earlier today, I went through my Instagram and I realized we've been posting these little playlists of each of the characters leading up to the up to release. And there's one character who we haven't posted their list yet, and it's Gavin. And immediately I was like, Gavin would be so upset.
Gavin would be so mad that he's the last one we did.
Yeah.
It's so funny because I was literally, as soon as you said like a playlist, I was like, man, Gavin would have the most sad boy playlist of all time. So I am very intrigued to hear that. But I also, so speaking of the cliffhangers, the angst at the end, and are you going to leave us that way in book 2? Will we feel resolved? Are we in for as many surprises?
I definitely think you're in for as many surprises over the course of the book, but we did try really hard to make that ending feel like a true finale. It does seem like all the loose ends are pretty tied up. And there's definitely still some open-ended questions, but hopefully in the way that's more like, you know, leave it up to the imagination. Yeah.
No, that totally makes sense. Because I heard a reviewer describe your characters specifically, as you guys mentioned, you're so character driven, just as terribly lovable characters, which I was kind of obsessed with, which is like such a human concept. So I'm curious, is that like important to you all through this book, that your characters were like hate to love and love to hate kind of characters?
Yeah, I mean, I think just due to the nature of them being in a death tournament, they were inherently going to have adversarial relationships with each other. And also due to the nature of them being in a death tournament, they were going to have to not be necessarily like the most morally upstanding people, which we knew would involve putting them in situations where sometimes you wouldn't know who to root for, or you would hate a character and then wind up loving them, or love a character and then wind up hating them. And that can be kind of difficult to balance as a creative, simply because you also have to balance like your own, like you have to, I think, accept that like you can't control sometimes, like you can try, but like readers are going to feel how they want to feel about characters. So I think we're very lucky in that people tend to fall more on the love side than the hate side with our characters. Because you never know when you're writing about a bunch of villains.
Yeah, although I do think that the reading community does have an obsession with the villain. We do tend to enjoy them quite a bit. So I mean, obviously love that there's an entire book about them. And so I did, before, I'm gonna answer some questions that were sent in from people, and then also some of the questions that are in the Q&A down below. But I did have just like a couple fun ones that I just wanna ask, because we're in this world. If you could have like a spell ring, like that you could use like from day to day, every day, which one would you have? Or if you could like create one.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, this is, I think, true in a multitude of magic systems through a multitude of books, but the here to there. I mean,
that's so true.
Don't we all want to be able to teleport? I feel obligated.
I would also go for the like levitation ones. I've always wanted to have telekinesis. I would like to just move things across the room to me, or like stand across the kitchen and like stir something and then like get back to it, you know? I feel like that's like the coolest thing that people like watching like animated witches do animated witch stuff. I'm like, I want that. I want things to hover.
Oh yeah, like it brings me back to like, all I want to do is like be Matilda or be in Practical Magic. Just let me have that ability. Yeah,
100%.
Now, do you think, which I'm not going to say which one you would use, because I think it's a little savage, though we could do it because you guys did write these, but where curse rings are concerned, what's your favorite curse ring?
Oh,
like these are wild too. The ones that you guys came up with, I'm literally like, what were they in Wonderland when they thought these up? Because they're so out of the box, but I love them.
That's tricky. Let's see, my favorite curse. I think my favorite curse throughout the whole series, if only because exactly like you said, like it's kind
Oh,
of,
I know what you're
it's a
gonna
weird one. We had a lot of fun coming up with the curses of the McCaslin family because they're supposed to be the kind of like gross, like rodent rat-like sort of family. There's this particular curse that Isabel has up her sleeve in book 2 that involves like fungus that is really
That's
terrifying.
exactly what I knew you were gonna say that. I knew you were gonna say that.
It was just so frightening, like reading it on page. It's something.
I feel like I've always been, I don't know. I think what I enjoyed the most about the curse rings was getting up to come up with like a bunch of different ones. Like it's hard for me to pick one specific favorite. I feel like obviously the lamb sacrifice is just so nasty that it like has to go on the list. But there is a specific curse in the second book that is actually a low family curse that I really enjoyed reading about / editing / writing about that is spoilery, but it's real nasty. I think that we both like writing body horror and we both like the imagery of it, and so every time we got to do that, we were like, this is the good shit.
I think that's, you got to make it fun, right? I mean, you have to have something that you guys are like, you send back and forth. You're like, no, I have the better one. Here you go. This is way more gnarly.
That's disturbing.
Oh yeah,
that's how it goes.
It's funny because neither of us, I think, can handle horror movies in real life, but like writing about horror is so fun.
Yeah.
There is the separation. I definitely think watching things can like terrorize me, but if I'm reading it, there's like, oh, I can just put that down. Like just close the book.
Yeah.
Something about it. I am going to pull in some questions from people that sent in when they signed up for the event. So let's see. Okay, so Megan from New York is curious kind of how you balance giving background information to your readers and building the exciting like plot sequences and scenes when you guys are writing together.
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah, can someone tell us how to do that?
How did we?
I think especially when writing a sequel, that's like a notable concern because you need to tell the reader, like you got to remind the reader what happened in the first book, but you also want to show them all the cool new things that are coming up. So balancing recapping and like information without it feeling like an overload is a very, very delicate art that we both put a lot of time and effort into. I think it takes a lot of rounds of revision, honestly, to layer in different levels of the scene and to see how it's hitting, not just with us, but with like our editor, our beta readers, stuff like that. Because it can be really hard sometimes when you're the author of something to know how the information is reading if people understand like that you've given them everything they need to know. So that's one of those things where it's really helpful to have another pair of eyes on it. I don't know, Amanda, do you have thoughts on this?
I mean, I was going to say pretty much the same thing, is that it is not something that comes out right the first time. It is not something that comes out right the second or the third time. It takes so many different rounds of revision of so many people's feedback to tell you, hey, like you just introduced this concept in chapter 6. Would have been nice to know this in chapter 2. And, or, you know, I did not understand this. And I know one thing in particular that was a really fun challenge, but was certainly a challenge, was introducing the world as a completely second world that isn't Earth, but that is modern at the same time. Having to put in words about like cars and department stores and all these little modern terminologies that I wouldn't, you know, when a reader goes into a fantasy novel, they don't expect that. So we had to really make an effort to layer it in. Otherwise, it would kind of, as we found out from our readers, kind of went over their shoulders, went over their heads. Went over their heads.
Both of the things. They're both there, right? Yeah. So, because I was curious, now I'm going to call it Ilvernath, but is it, do I pronounce it a different way?
No, that's right.
Okay. Was it based on, like, was there a specific place that you guys had in mind, or you like Pinterest board people who are like, I have to see it to like write about it?
Oh, we definitely do have a Pinterest board. But it's fake. We made it up. it's like kind of fake Scotland, but with like, obviously we're American, so that's blood in there too. And we wanted it to feel, I think for both of us, we really enjoy like writing about contained settings, like a city or a town or an environment that feels like a character in and of its space. So that was what was most important to us, that even though it was a fake place, it felt like just as much of a character as any of the champions, which was really fun to do.
Yeah, no, I just felt like it reminded me of like a Scotland or Ireland kind of space. So I love it. That is where you guys picked. I was like, I need something that's like kind of gloomy and like current at the same time with like a little bit of classic. So that's how I envisioned it. I also have a question, which I know you probably aren't going to be able to answer, but I'm going to ask anyway. Amy from Kansas asks, is there some way to save Alistair?
I mean, I guess you'll find out whether or not there is in book 2. We can't spoil anything.
No, that's fair. I had to let them know that it was asked. And I'm going to start with some of the questions that we've gotten on the Q&A. I'll knit some of those in. I have one question that says, what was harder to write, book 1 or book 2? Like, did you feel like you were in a rhythm by 2, or was it like, oh no, we have to conclude this thing?
I think they were both hard in different ways. We had a lot more time to write book 1. And so that was, I think, a thing that we both struggled with. Book 1, we wrote around a lot of other deadlines because we both have solo works, but we wrote it over the course of like 3-4 years. Book 2, we wrote in a lot less time than that. So we were like, oh, this is what we're doing. We are going, it was a marathon and a sprint. So yeah, I think I can't speak for both of us. I think book 2 is harder to write than book 1.
Yeah, it is tricky because the first book, since we had so much time to do it, it also means that it's been a long time since we started working on that book. It's been a long time since we were in like the original heart of the story, trying to figure out what it was about, which is definitely one of the most challenging parts of the process. So what sticks out in my mind is editing All of Our Demise, because that was all of a few months ago. But yeah, I would agree that I think both were challenging in different ways. It's always difficult in the first book to figure out what the story is truly about, and then it's always difficult in the second book, at least in a duology, to wrap it all up.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I mean, do you have another one that kind of bounces off that? Mandy says, first of all, how dare you with the ending of All of Us Villains? But then on a serious note, did you feel like it was more challenging or made it easier to kind of have someone else holding you accountable through the like writing process with a co-author rather than writing it solo, or did it like present its own challenges as well?
It's definitely easier to have somebody there to call you out on your nonsense.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, to be fair, I think both of us in our solo work, we are pretty good about holding ourselves accountable. And like, I don't think either of us necessarily lack discipline. We don't necessarily need the other person to be poking and nudging, but it doesn't mean that it's not appreciated when the other person is poking and nudging, and reminding you that you said the same word 3 times in the same paragraph.
Do you have a favorite word or is there a word that you guys can tell me about the other person that they use repetitively?
Oh man. Oh no. We made some discoveries. Specific phrase. I feel like saying it's spoilery because then people will go look for them, and I'm sure they linger.
I know. I can think of several that we encountered over the course of line edits. Yeah, and I'm scared to say them because I feel like as soon as I say them, somebody will be like, "Oh, there it is."
Like that means you wrote XYZ. Yeah, but there were a couple that it almost became like a meme, like, oh, there it is again. There it is again. There was also, this has been completely cut, so I don't feel bad about saying this, but there was an instance in Villains where there was a specific chapter where the word hoarsely was used as a dialogue descriptor like 7 or 8 times in one chapter.
Our characters are really suffering.
Like hoarsely, yeah.
Okay.
It was, we eradicated it, so it's undetectable now.
I love this. I love how both of you immediately, it was like you knew exactly what phrases you were both talking about. But we have a couple, there are some character-based questions. So I feel like I want to say that it goes without saying that if you say you relate to a character or root for one or whatever, that it doesn't mean that you wrote them. If you're worried and don't want to answer, that's totally fair. But I feel like even when I'm writing, I root for characters that are not the main character or ones that my friends are writing. So we're just going to say that that has been said. That is a couple of the questions that we're getting is which character do you relate to most, and was that the one you rooted for to win, or did you root for another one to win?
I feel like they kind of all deserved to lose for different reasons. But
She's like, nobody
for
wins.
different reasons too.
Yeah.
I think I found myself relating a lot to Gavin and Hendry for really different reasons. I relate a lot to characters who are very sensitive, and who feel like they're like they've been put in a world where they're like, what's going on here? What am I doing? I also like to take naps. But I related a lot to Gavin because I feel like, especially like without spoiling anything in Demise, I feel like a lot of the like stuff that he went through, I don't know, it was kind of hard not to root for him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I feel like I have to pick Isabel. When we were originally going through each of the characters and setting up what their families would be like, we wanted all of their families to be feel distinct from each other. And so for Isabel's family, her parents are actually divorced, and my parents are divorced. And actually, my dad, my parents have both remarried, and I have tons of siblings at this point. And that was just such a foundational part of growing up for me, was living between two different houses, just like Isabel does, and having different families that live that never interact with each other. And so being able to put that into the story was really rewarding, because I often felt growing up that I never really got to see that in fiction unless the book was truly about that. And I never really liked to read about it because I was living it. I didn't necessarily need to. And so I thought that was just a really rewarding thing to put in. And even though her parents are not in any way the same as mine, they just to be able to kind of write about like, oh, her bedroom at her mom's house, her bedroom at her dad's house, and her mom's family versus her dad's, and what that experience is like, was a really fun element to be able to add to one of the characters within our cast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've actually heard a couple people tell me this week that how much they relate to Isabel and love that she was included. So I figured I'd give you that one, or let you know that one as well. Because I also, calling back to one of your earlier questions, Jacqueline, hi Jacqueline, asks why all villains. It was definitely her favorite aspect of the story.
Well, they're in a death tournament. It's not a great place to be a hero. Doesn't stop some of them from trying, but I feel like you might as well just be honest with yourself if you're in that sort of situation.
Yeah, I think when we went into the story knowing that we would be talking so much about stories, about fairy tales, stories inherently have a hero and a villain. And in this case, can any of them truly be called a hero? And so once we hit that question in our heads, from that point onward, we were like, oh, we're totally leaning into this. And it became such a huge running theme throughout the book.
I feel like, yeah, in a lot of ways, I feel like we have obviously a lot of like themes and stuff and through lines, but one of the themes I think that was really present in villains was like, can we really call any of them, like, can you call any of these people a hero? And then the second one's like, but can you call any of them a villain?
Yeah, no, I felt that way a lot. I honestly want to give every character a hug at this point, but I totally understand what you mean. It just like really highlights the duality that I think that fantasy and like sci-fi do really well in a way that is easy to understand. I think it like simplifies a little bit of what whether it's the tropes or the themes in real life in a way that like I can see it objectively. I don't know if you guys feel that way, but it's one of my favorite like parts of fantasy novels is just being able to like step back and be like, oh, this all of a sudden makes sense to me. in real life.
Yeah, I mean, we're huge genre fans in real life. We don't just write about it, we read it and consume it across all media. So definitely.
Yeah, I did see that you are also a Claire Legrand fan. And
Yes.
I am a huge like Imperium trilogy fan. And
oh my gosh, those books are so good.
It's my like favorite trilogy, and gave me all of the Riel vibes, these two books, and it made me so happy. I was like, this is what I'm here for.
Oh my God, that's such a high compliment because Riel is one of my favorite book characters of all time. I'm obsessed with her.
Oh yeah, she's unlike any character, I believe. I that was a little tangent, but I just had to say I see the parallels and I'm obsessed with them.
No, amazing tangent. Thank you so much.
You got it. Now I do have a question from Raquel. She asked us, did the Hunger Games movies inspire you to write this book?
I wouldn't say that it was specifically the movies, but the Hunger Games as a whole, the movies, the books, definitely were a huge inspiration for us. Both of us were in high school when the Hunger Games books came out. And so we were very impressionable. We both wanted to be YA writers at that time. And so, of course, one of the most popular YA genre series at that time, like we totally fell in love with it. And so when we got to talking about the prospect of, I mean, what began the entire process of writing All of Us Villains was a conversation about what some of our favorite tropes were. And we brought up the death tournament and how, you know, it had gotten so big with the Hunger Games that like it seemed almost unapproachable. We didn't feel brave enough to do that alone.
Yeah, and we didn't want to like presume to like, we are not Suzanne Collins. She is on a whole other level. But we did think that we had an interesting way to talk about what a technical death tournament that's very, very, very different, I think, from the Hunger Games. But still, definitely, I mean, homage, you know. Also, some of us may or may not have had Tumblrs that were mostly dedicated to the Hunger Games, and it definitely wasn't me.
I think I was in that same, I think I was either in middle school or high school when those books also came out, and it was like the golden age of like dystopian and fantasy, at least in my brain, because it was like how I grew up, and I was like, they're all being turned into movies. This is the best thing ever. But I think that you guys do it in a way that is so incredibly different than those books, but with such a cool exploration of it. I think that they are totally different, but I see how like that would have been an homage to her, to those books. I mean, and I'm curious because someone did ask what made you start writing together on this like specific book. And so was it really that conversation where all of a sudden you were like, I don't want to do this alone. Do you want to give this a shot?
Yeah, I mean, we were the full origin story is that we were very much like already close friends and critique partners. We met because I was Amanda's chosen mentee in a mentorship contest for aspiring authors being paired with either like agented or like published authors. And we got really close really fast. We realized we were really similar. And we had spent a lot of time reading each other's work and editing it. And so it wasn't that wild to be like, why don't we try this together? We had tried to co-write something else before that, and it had gone not so well, but not because we didn't enjoy the co-writing process. It just wasn't the right idea. And so when we had this conversation, we were like, I think this might be the one, this might be the idea. And we gave it a go. And yeah, I mean, it worked out. That makes it sound a lot simpler than it actually was. But I think we did know early on that the idea was special and that it was worth pursuing, even though we were also like, it's a death tournament book. No one's gonna want this.
I think we all realized that it was something wanted. I remember I got the art to this book, and I read it in like 24 hours. And I remember I was halfway through it, and already I made my review, and I was like, I'm not supposed to do this. I'm not supposed to like tell people to read it before I finish a book, but I already know everybody's going to love it, and I need to tell them before anybody else does. So even though you say it like took a lot to get there and you didn't know if it was like insurmountable of like the death tournament trope, it obviously worked because we're all very invested.
Thank you. That's
Yeah,
of
that's good to hear.
Now you guys did say that you were gonna be writing together again, but someone asked that they know this is a duology, but would you write any other books in this world?
Never say never. We actually have talked about it before, in terms probably more like looking back at tournaments past and playing with those. And those would be really fun. But at the moment, we are focusing on a new duology, the first of which is coming out in 2024. And in fact, this entire last few months have been us writing it. We're very much in the trenches with it.
Holy smokes. Okay, it's been a busy year for you guys.
Yep.
Back to back. I mean, of course, the first thing I thought of when you said looking back, I was like, okay, so are we gonna get like a children's book of all the stories of tournaments past? And then I was like, that probably isn't a children's book, Maggie. But in my head, it really makes sense for this series. Just all the old legends of the family.
I mean, that would be very cool. And it would definitely be something that the children of Ilvernath would be told to read. I don't know if that means it's appropriate for children.
Exactly. But yeah, I also know that you were talking about how you guys were initially mentor and mentee, and I definitely want to make sure that this question is asked before we end tonight. And it's just, what advice would you give to aspiring authors?
I would say the advice that I normally give is to seek out creative writing resources. This was something that I started doing when I decided that I really wanted to be an author back when I was in high school. I had always wanted to be a writer, but that was when I doubled down. I wanted to finish a book. I wanted to pursue it. And I found that not only were the resources really helpful, like honestly more helpful than any of the creative writing classes that I took throughout high school and in college, but they were also just so empowering. And once I felt like I understood different creative writing techniques and tools and elements of a story, every single book or television show or any media that I consumed from that point onward, I gained so much more out of, like 2-3 times as much as simply just reading it. And so there's tons of blogs out there, tons of books, and I wholly recommend throwing yourself in them, because even though it can sound a little boring to read what is essentially like writing textbooks, they're also, I actually thought that they were really, really fun. I had a great time with that, and I still read them all the time.
I have never read a craft book, but I have read a lot of writing resources online, and I would recommend that, like, if you are kind of not sure where to start, a lot of authors have talked pretty openly about their process and craft online. Susan Dennard's How to Revise Your Book, like, taught me how to break down a story. I literally would not be an author if I had not followed that. Like, it was like, I pretty much stapled those rules in my brain and went through them. And that's not at all how I revise now, but it like really helped me break stories down into like A plot, B plot, C plot, like everything, like structure for the first time. Adrienne Young also has a fantastic series, and it's actually, I think, coming out with Cowriting, a like thing called like the Storyteller's Workbook. It's like a kind of guidebook for like aspiring writers, I believe, and she does like really cool workshops and stuff. Anyway, the point is there's a ton of resources out there, and a lot of them are authors who you might already know and love. So that's always a good place to start. I would also recommend trying to find critique partners. I know this is like kind of vague advice, but it's so important to I think not just find like people who you can like talk to about writing and books and stuff, but also I think people who take it as seriously as you do. I think in order to become a professional writer, you have to treat yourself like a professional. You have to like decide that you are a professional long before anyone actually pays you for anything. And other people doing that with you makes it a lot easier and more fun.
Yeah, no, I think it's the way that you talk about a headspace or like that mindset is helpful in so many creative careers. You have to just say that you are what you want to be and treat yourself as such before, and that is how you will carry yourself as you walk into it. So I love that. I am curious if you are able at all to tell us about this next book that you're writing or what it's about, or if everything is under wraps and we can just look forward to the fact that you guys are writing another book together.
Oh no, we can tell you a lot.
Oh, this is so exciting. Okay, yes, I think we would all love to know a little bit more about that before I ask our last few All of Our Demise questions.
Before we get maybe deeper into it, the overall idea, the same way that All of Us Villains was like the death tournament, this book is the chosen ones. In fact, it's actually star-crossed rival chosen ones who fall in love.
But may or may not be supposed to kill each other. They maybe had some crossed wires on what their destiny was. Oops, oh no.
I think you just put all of I heard star-crossed and might be supposed to kill each other, could fall in love, and I'm just like, where do I sign? It's like credit card thing, like take my money. But okay, well, we are very excited for that. Are you doing the same sort of thing of let's do multiple POVs?
Yeah, this one's 2 POVs and we each took one, and it's way more of like a fantasy romance than Villains is. Although Demise actually has a ton of romance in it, but this one is like we were like, this is so fun. Neither of us had, I think, ever written like a true like second world fantasy romance before, and we both are like, oh, we're hooked. This is so fun.
It's really fun.
Yeah.
As a reader, it's very fun to read as well. I will just say, love both, but then how do you feel like, or what have you learned, I guess, in writing All of Our Demise that you think is going to help or has already helped as you write your next book?
A whole bunch of things. Honestly, the co-writing process, I do feel like All of Our Demise was a challenge for all the things that we talked about before, but going into this book's called A Fate So Cold. Going into A Fate So Cold, we felt like such pros. Like,
oh yeah. And
we knew how to outline, like we had it all down.
Honestly, you can really tell too. Like we know, I think we also are better at knowing kind of what each other like needs. Like we're like, this is when we need to cheerlead, and this is when we need to like get a little bit more into the nuts and bolts of it. Like we're both kind of not afraid to, we trust each other so much collaboratively now that it feels like a really safe and fun environment to write in, which is really special. And I feel very, very lucky that we get to do this together.
Yeah, it's actually been kind of magical to go through because it's been so many years since we came up with All of Us Villains and had like that high of like coming up with a book with your best friend. It's been honestly really magical to get to do that all over again and be like, writing something that you can't wait for the other person to read and like reading over what they wrote and just being like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Oh, it's like the best little like fangirl best friend moment of constantly hyping each other up, but also being excited about the same idea. It's kind of like the dream.
It's
so
really amazing. The number of texts we've sent each other that are like, can you believe this is our job?
Oh my gosh, I love that for you guys. Do you feel like it helped to write your own novels first, like and have your own voice very set before you came together, or did that really affect it?
I think it helps. Yeah. You learn something with every book, and so we both brought a lot of experience to the table, and that wasn't shared. Even though we had edited each other's work before that, it wasn't shared experience. Like we both brought different types of expertise and stuff that has played a role in all of the stories that we've written.
I think we learned a lot from each other, and I like that our books, I think our books together read as different than either of our individual books, because I think that's how it should be. It's not a 50% Amanda book and a 50% Christine book. It's a 100% something else book.
And you felt that in reading it. I never felt like, even going from POV to POV, it wasn't like I'm reading a different author. Like it very much felt like the same voice all the way through. So at least on this end, it very much felt like that as well, which is pretty ideal, I guess, where you guys are coming from. I am curious when it comes to All of Our Demise, what you guys were like your end goal with this duology, what you really wanted to get across, or if something was like very important to you.
There's a lot of things. I think a theme that specifically wound up really resonating with me was like the kinds of stories that we tell ourselves and the kind of stories that are told to us, the stuff that we think is true, and so we make it true, and the realization that actually you can change a lot more than you think sometimes.
Yeah, that was, at least in reading, I don't think I realized how much I almost believed along with the characters. I was like, oh, okay, they're telling me this, and so I accept it. And then I'm like, well, why didn't you question anything else that was going on in the world? And you do just like accept certain things as fact, not realizing that you have a choice in the matter.
Yeah, I also think that in All of Our Demise, because we went into all of us villains, you know, with the idea of the death tournament trope and like really wanting to both subvert it and embrace it at the same time. And I think by the time we hit All of Our Demise, we really hit our stride in that regard. Like we were fully ready to embrace campiness. Like there was nothing that was too dramatic, nothing that like was too fun or too extra. Like we knew like we were writing this for the campiness, for the fun. And I think we gave ourselves a lot of permission right off the bat. That it took us a while, I think, to get there with all of us films. We like kind of questioned ourselves at first, and then we were like, no, we're all in. We're absolutely all in.
I love that. I have, this is a good kind of way to wrap it up. I have kind of one more thought. I do have someone in the comments that says, not a question, just so excited for this new book, which is very much how I feel about everyone reading this and being able to talk to them about it. So what are you hoping that the readers get from this last book, or that you're excited for them to, I guess, read?
I know what you're going to say.
I don't know what I'm going to say. What am I going to say?
There's one specific scene that we get really feral reactions to that
I wasn't gonna say that, but like now that you say it,
but I did want to say, so first of all, I wanted to say in case the time cuts off and we get kicked out, thank you so much everyone for being here tonight. And to Barnes & Noble for having us. All of Us Films was the YA paperback pick of the month for August, and it's been so incredible to see so many people get invested in our series right before our sequel comes out. It's so cool. And so for people who may have just picked this up or who read it when it first came out, I am so excited for you to see who kisses who.
I'm also excited for this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, same from me. Thank you guys so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And going into book 2, I can't wait. All the romance. Yeah, that it really is that. We worked really hard on it, and we're really happy with all of them. And I think that it might surprise you, but I think ultimately, I think we did a good job.
I would say as a reader, they did an excellent job, and I squealed to high heaven. And so I just want to get you guys excited to read this book. It comes out tomorrow. Thank you to everyone who joined. And just a reminder that All of Our Demise and all of their titles are available 24/7 on barnesandnoble.com and at your local Barnes & Noble stores. And yeah, guys, go post on social media and get super excited for this next book. Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was great. All of your questions were awesome. And all the questions from the audience were great as well.
Yeah, what a fun night. Thank you everyone for coming to hang out with us.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.